Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the class episodes Co-Owner of a Lonely Heart, as well as Brave-ish Heart, written by Patrick Ness and is directed by Philippina Langdell, I believe her name is pronounced. This is the first two-parter in the class series. I believe as well as the only two-parter. There is a story which are two episodes connected later on, but they're not really a two-part adventure. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This sees the return of the Shadow King, a creature that had first appeared in the first episode of Class, For Tonight We Might Die. It also introduces us to April's father, who I forgot to write down on my notes here, so I can't remember his name or the actor who plays him, so I do apologise that. As well as going into more delving in certain about characters and certain elements of the story. For example, the cabinet that Charlie has, and the whole deal with that, and how characters learn more about him as an individual and learn about his experiences. We also get April being tempted with the dark side of the Force, shall we say, as her heart is connected with the Shadow King. After the Shadow King tries to rehabilitate another chain in the connection between the two hearts, because they share the same heart now, their personalities start to blend. So the Shadow King starts to act more like April, and April starts acting more like the Shadow King, which is dealing into a much more of a present threat. But that is actually kind of like not a B story to the A story, but there's actually two stories going around here. We have the April story, which is connecting to Shadow King and is dealing with this. But there's also a subplot which starts lingering in the first episode, The Co-Owner of a Lonely Heart, and then slowly becomes a bigger threat to which in the final episode, Brave-ish Heart, it becomes a main focus, and that is the whole deal with these pedals that have been popping around everywhere around Coal Hill School. Now, the titles of these episodes I find really interesting. Co-Owner of a Lonely Heart is a reference to the Yes song, Owner of a Lonely Heart. The fact that he didn't play the song in this episode, massive disappointment, massive missed opportunity. Whilst Brave-ish Heart is actually a reference to the Fifth Doctor's catchphrase, Brave Heart Tegan. So that's cool. And the Brave-ish Heart, it's also connecting with the story and the whole heart scenario. So that's kind of cool. That's pretty cool. But then, on to the episode itself. As I said, there's mainly two plot lines going along here. As April, she starts to struggle more as we see the Shadow King. He basically has, he's basically asked one of his men to come up with a device that will link the hearts even more. They will tighten the bond between them with a new link between the two bodies. However, the link sort of works, but it only just strengthens the two characters into a point where both their personalities, as I say, merge. This comes at a very inconvenient time for April. She starts having nightmares and she can now summon these shadow blades, which is actually pretty cool, though I do feel that the directing does kind of let it down. We'll go into the directing more later on in the video, but it's really cool. April gets these kind of swords and her eyes start burning red. She starts having these kind of fits, and her emotions go are wild. There are scenes where she is trying to confront her feelings, trying to emotionally attach herself to Ram, and sometimes she becomes distant because of her anger and stuff, but then her brain kind of connects. There's also a really un-April moment where she's in the school and she's just like and she starts talking about war, because in the class they're talking about war, and she is just going on, it's like they should have died if they to survive a war, or to run away from a war is the coward's way, and you should fight or die or defeat all your enemies. A much more brutalistic mindset. It reminds me a lot of a kind of Jekyll and Hyde scenario. It's the kind of story we've seen a lot in science fiction, but here I think actually deals very well, especially when at the first episode, the Co-Owner of the Lonely Heart episode, it's actually like the main focus for the majority of the part, as the second subplot, which doing these pedals and like this conspiracy which links into Charlie and Miss Quill and all that, as they as that there's a lingering threat, which we do kind of see these kind of pedals. They kind of appear more, and then we see like a dead squirrel with a lot of these pedals, and this great atmosphere of these pedals like slowly building into the background, which slowly quickly becomes a bigger threat, and the characters starting to notice it more. But with Charlie as well, there's also this implication of Tanya and Mateus. They're basically starting to realize that Charlie might not be the most perfect individual possible, as they're kind of starting to see how much he starts treating Quill with disrespect, and how he basically treats her like a slave. And he's just like, no, in my people, this is fine, this is punishment for her being a war criminal who tries to dishonest the throne or something like that. And Tanya's just like, well, it looks more like slavery from my point of view, and maybe if you treat people like this, maybe you should have been dethroned. And Tanya and Charlie actually get a heated debate and a debated argument, and that is kind of interesting. I do really like this element. My problem with it in this episode is that it is kind of cut short for the threat of the pedals, as well as another aspect of the story where Miss Quill gets introduced to this character, Dorothea, the new headmaster, the headmistress, played by Puli Quasnell. I believe her name is pronounced Puli Quasnell, who's a great actor. She gives this great performance of this sinister, playing in the shadows, who we learn is part of the governess community, which we have heard about in the Coach of the Dragon Tattoo, this secret organization, which is keeping a close eye on the Coal Hill School's activities as well as the Crack in Time, and there's a sinister plot between them. And basically, Dorothea's character, she's basically talking to Miss Quill, and she's basically trying to tell her about these pedals around, and that they basically know everything about the class team, our class team, and she wants Quill to try and convince Charlie to use the box, the cabinet of souls, which he has told before that it doesn't work. However, it's revealed in this episode. It's here that Quill learns that the device actually works. Now, Dorothea actually tries to get Quill to convince Charlie to use the device to kill the pedals. Basically, we learn that it stores the souls of Charlie's race. All their souls get carbonated into this cabinet, and it's basically used as a weapon, as each soul connects itself to a individual, and then basically burns both souls out. And the threat of these pedals are getting more and more and more. Basically, they multiply, and the more they consume blood, the more they become, and it won't be long until not only do they devour the entire planet, but can eat human flesh in manner of seconds, in manner of minutes, as we slowly start and see in episode 2 of all the pedals eating up people. And this also takes a massive hit in Quill's personality, as she basically learns that the device that could have killed the Shadow King and destroy both their enemies, the killed racist people and Charlie's people. Charlie had the device to use to destroy them, to get revenge, but Charlie just refuses to use it. And that kind of stuff is kind of interesting. There's a lot of debate in the process of the episode. However, I never felt like Charlie was ever going to use the box. I felt like this dilemma is kind of hindered on the fact that you're engaged enough that you think Charlie would use the device. However, the episode never really gives you that feeling, that strength of the episode letting you believe that will be an outcome in the adventure. And that's kind of a shame, because the story is kind of trying to push the idea of what Charlie and who Charlie is, but it doesn't grab you enough on it. And that also takes a front and center from the more interesting subplot of him basically having more sinister intent of using Miss Quill as essentially a slave. He is using her as a slave, and the episode does bring that up. The episode does let you know, like, this is a bad thing, and Tanya really like nails into him, and then that kind of stuff just gets put in the back burner. In fact, in the second episode, I can't remember a single thing Tanya does, which is a really crying shame because I thought she was really great in the night. That one with the father, I can't remember the name of it at the moment on the top of my head. But yeah, these two plot lines, I do think they do work really well as mixing up. It does feel like two different plot lines for two different episodes, combined into 2 episodes, but like the editing is mixed in together like that. However, I do feel like here it actually does kind of work because the plot line of the pedals also links with the Shadow King, and that keeps us engaged in the Shadow King's storyline, which is the main focus. The main deal at the first episode is April dealing with her father, reuniting with her father, and this anger overtakes her. And there's this really strange scene where her father just kind of walks in on her and her mother, and she gets the anger, she gets the emotions, and after her friends convince her, not to kill again. Same thing here. April is such too nice of a character that I never believed for a moment that she would have actually like killed her father or anything. It does become kind of cliche, that kind of, no, you will not do this. This is not the April we know. Don't do this. Don't go to the dark. And then they just don't. It's something that we've seen 100 times before, and here the episode does it good. The episode does it well, but it needs to go a little bit further, in my opinion. But there's this really strange scene. Basically, her mother's in a wheelchair, and she uses her ability to fix her mother's back. And then the cliffhanger for part 1 is that she makes a portal into the Shadow Realm, and she uses the swords to basically transport it. By the way, that effect is the same kind of effect, like a sword breaking into reality to reveal a darker universe. Is the same effect they would have used in the post-credit scene for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness around about 5 years later, if I remember maths correctly. 7, 8, 9, 10... 6 years. Yeah, 7 years. So that's really strange to me personally. I remember watching, I was like, hold on, our effect looks very, very familiar. Yeah, very bizarre. And then Ram follows her in, and Ram basically, in the second episode, Ram and April are stuck in the Shadow Dimension, and she basically questions to go up against the Shadow King and basically have a battle to the death. As Ram tries to convince her, no, she's not a murderer, she's not a mean individual, she's strong, she's better than this. Again, I think actually in the second half it's actually worse here, because now the entire emotional hook revolves around April, trying not to go into her darker side. But we've literally just seen her not only beat this temptation, where she almost but didn't kill her father, but also fixed her mother's back. And now you're trying to tell me that this is the type of person who would try and kill the Shadow King? Yeah, I'm not buying it at all. And because of that, the final act of this episode, where the Shadow King basically gets defeated by April, she then goes back into the main Earth, onto our Earth. She's starting to learn about these pedals and dilemmas. And because she beat the Shadow King in battle, she basically becomes the new king of the Shadow King. Yeah, it's confusing because they're called the Shadow King, and there's no such thing as a queen in this culture. There's only kings. So you're the king of the Shadow King, and she's basically the new Shadow King. She dethrones the old Shadow King and puts him in prison, and tells basically her new army to get rid of all these pedals. And because of that, Charlie doesn't have to use the Cabinet of Souls, and he puts it away and locks it away, and is like, tells Dorothea, to bugger off, essentially. And that's about it, really. So overall, I think the episode is decent. The two-parter is decent. It has a lot of great moments, it has a lot of great action scenes, and has a lot of great elements of the story. But it's something that I don't think anybody has not seen before. The idea of the pedals and the secret invasion, a small like eating virus thing coming out and building more and more and more. In the background, again, is something that we've seen before, but it's actually really cool and it's well executed here. The idea of April being confessed, personality shifting with the Shadow King leads into some humorous moments, like when April and Ram do it, and the Shadow King basically makes out with one of his dominions, and he starts to like get more emotional about it. There's some really funny moments. But overall, the episode is just kind of okay, which is something you kind of expect from Class. But the next episode of Class will really try and push the series in what it can and can't do. But anyway, that is the story for another time. So anyway, that was Co-Owner of Only a Heart and Bravish Heart. So join me next time when we go back to the Doctor and Bill as they go to a new alien planet, as they find a abandoned city run by emoji monsters, emoji robots, as there's a sinister ploy lurking around in this new city. So join me next time for Smile, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!